Welcome to Order Militaris Radio TV. We here are lifelong Catholics, and what we do here is all for free, in love of Jesus Christ and the Most Holy Trinity and His Holy Church. We'll defend their Holy Mother, the Church. Our work is the true sense of the apostolate. Any funds raised goes back into this work for equipment. This helps us to give you an unbiased, hard-hitting truth that isn't controlled by political correctness or interest groups. Today's topic is helping the Russians at sea. It'll be going on Chapter 9 from National Suicide, Military Aid to the Soviet Union by Anthony C. Sutton. We welcome Brother Alexis to the show.
Thank you, AJ, for having me on. It's always a pleasure to be on Order Militaris Radio TV and continue our series exposing how the Masonic Lodge played everyone in the 20th century and was actually behind, in this series, arming Russia. We talked about how they financed and armed Hitler. They also armed Russia. And now we're going to talk about how they helped Russia in the Cold War after World War II. And this is, I'm not yet old enough to remember it, although I lived through a lot of this in the Cold War. But let's first set the stage. If you're not aware, in the 60s, Russia started building missile installations on the island of Cuba so that they could counter the threat that the US made against Russia by putting missiles in Turkey. And they built silos, and the US government discovered it through high altitude planes and taking photographs of Cuba. And that would cause the Cuban Missile Crisis, where it seemed pretty much that Russia and the United States might go to war over it, because Kennedy told Russia they had to take the missiles out or there would be war. And Russia did take the missiles out, and Kennedy was hailed as a hero. It only came out just a few years ago that Kennedy convinced them to take them out by agreeing also to take missiles out of Turkey. But that part of the agreement was hidden and no one ever knew of until decades later. So this is the Cuban Missile Crisis, and the missiles, how on earth did they get to Cuba?
Yeah. Well, before they got to Cuba, they had to have ships big enough to haul those things. So it starts off by a question to an admiral. Does the Soviet Navy worry you? Answer. The Soviet Navy is dramatically more powerful than it was 10 years ago. You can trace almost to the point at which the Soviets began their tremendous construction program. Admiral Elmo R. Zumwalt, Jr., Chief of Naval Operations, in U.S. News and World Report, September 13, 1971.
And who was behind this tremendous buildup?
It was so ship and submarine construction requires sheet steel plate, and steel sections and numerous specifications. Armor plate is produced by rolling high alloy steel, which is then heat treated to develop its ballistic properties. Multiple layers of such plates can be used for armor protection. Therefore, assistance to the Soviet iron and steel industry, which is significant in continuing, is also assistance to Soviet ship construction programs. A U.S. government agency report has asserted that any shipyard capable of building a merchant ship whole is equally capable of building a combatant ship of the same length. So, and it goes on. The report also states that the merchant ships can be designed for conversion into naval ships. and that in any event, the facilities required to build a steel merchant ship are exactly the same as the facilities required to build a steel warship. The main difference are the armaments and the varying specifications for engines and other equipment. Almost 70% of the present Soviet merchant fleet has been built outside the Soviet Union. This has released Soviet shipyards and materials for Soviet naval construction. All diesel engines in the Soviet merchant ships use a technology originating outside the Soviet Union.
So this is right during the Cold War, when every effort should have been made to prevent the Soviet Union getting any technology, let alone naval technology, because Russia's pretty naval, I would say ocean locked, in the sense of they don't have many ports that are really all year round. There's the Black Sea is about their own and about their only port that's all year round, and that's locked through the Straits of Turkey. So they have a big handicap when it comes to Navy, unless they get help. And it's kind of, well, we only know in 45, Avel Harriman was in Moscow to talk to the Soviets about getting things all cushy. And now we have, that means, and in those 13, 14 years, they built up a Navy.
So the Soviets provided 80% of the supplies for the North during the war in Vietnam. Most of these supplies were transported by merchant ship. The ocean-going capacity required to supply the North Vietnamese on the scale, and so keep them in the war, was dependent upon ships previously built outside the USSR. Technology of the US origin as supply of such maritime technology was formally forbidden by Congress. Grossly inefficient administration of the export control laws allowed the Soviets to acquire a massive military transportation capacity.
So here's another case where the Congress did the right thing, but the executive branch betrayed the will of the people.
Mm-hmm.
I guess this happened under what, Eisenhower?
Eisenhower to Kennedy.
Eisenhower to Kennedy.
Yep. Now we get into the specifics. Only one Soviet battleship was built before World War II, the Tretий International, or the Third International, laid down on July 15, 1939, in the Leningrad yards. This was a 35,000-ton battleship. The guns, the turrets, the armor, the boilers were purchased in the United States and Germany, and the ship was completed in the late 1940s. Other pre-war Soviet battleships, the Mariat, the Kumna, and the Oktyabrskaya Revolutia, were reconditioned and refitted ex-Tsarist vessels. The Mariat, that's Kolchak's. Sorry, I just had to say that. Anyway, they were refitted with these new American and German guns and boilers and everything. Attempts to build 3 battleships of the Italian Vittorio Veneto class came to nothing. Sorry, Venice. So yeah, there we go.
So Russia had an insignificant navy at the end of the Second World War, but then went on a massive building campaign. Does Sutton name the companies or the countries that were involved in helping and how they got this deal made?
Yeah, let's see. Making sure. Okay. Then he goes into the aircraft carriers. These ships and two other carriers were built on the basis of the American blueprints. The Stalin, formerly the Tsarist Admiral Konovinova, was a 9,000-ton ship built in 1914, redesigned in 1929, and completed in 1939 as an aircraft carrier. Two other carriers of 12,000 tons each were built on the basis of American blueprints. The Krasnov, the Zeman, and the Volshova laid down at Leningrad in 1939 and 1940. So now we get into the firms. In January 1939, the American firm of Gibbs and Cox Naval Architects was requested to design two destroyers, in addition to the 45,000-ton battleship already under design for the Soviet Union and the United States. In July of the same year, General Electric and Westinghouse signified their intention to quote on the propulsive units for these destroyers. Yep.
We've heard Westinghouse's name and General Electric before. They were the same companies that were arming Germany.
Now you won't hear this, folks, from any other source. From 1939 to 1941, the Soviets received German military assistance. The Nazis sent a partly finished cruiser, the Lutzow, laid down at Bremen in 1937. In May 1941, the latest available report was that the construction of the cruiser L in Leningrad was proceeding according to plan. In the Leningrad yards, German technicians took over construction and repaired the several large Soviet ships. This cooperation lasted for 18 months from late 1939 until May 1941.
Yeah, because it was in June of 41, or was it July of 41 that Germany declared war on Russia. So they were allies. Well, communists and socialists are allies. And there's a whole big story behind the Nazis and the Russians were allies. They knew they were allies because they're both being funded by American Freemasons. The war was theater.
Yeah. All told, in 1941, the Soviet fleet comprised 3 battleships, 8 cruisers, 85 destroyers, and torpedo boats, 24 mine layers, 75 minesweepers, 300 motor torpedo boats, and gunboats, and 250 submarines. Most of these were built in the West or to Western design.
Okay, it's a fleet mostly for coastal protection, because there's very few, only had one battleship. Okay. That was at the close of World War II. Now, when Sutton says there's been a massive buildup, I'm quoting that admiral, does he give stats on just how big it gets?
Yeah. Lend-Lease added 441 ships to this total, 46 110 submarine chasers, 59 65-foot submarine chasers, 221 torpedo boats, 24 of them from the United Kingdom, 77 minesweepers, 28 frigates, 52 small landing crafts, 2 large landing crafts from the United Kingdom, and 6 cargo barges. In addition to these combat vessels, Lend-Lease provided numerous merchant ships and marine engines. In terms of tonnage, Lend-Lease probably doubled the size of the Soviet Navy. Only a small number of these naval ships have been returned, although the Lend-Lease Master Agreement required the return of all vessels.
Yeah, the Lend-Lease required that they pay everything back too, and they never did that. They still haven't done it. And to the tune of, I think it's now like $50-60 billion worth. But why is Lend-Lease giving Russia ships? I mean, we're supposed to help their army fight. It's not like they need ships. What coastline would they be defending against Germany? Maybe something in the Baltic, but that's not where the Lend-Lease was going, since the Baltic was closed off during the war.
Yeah. Now, if you like submarine movies and you watch the movie on the Soviet submarine, K-19, The Widowmaker, with Harrison Ford and Liam Neeson, you're thinking, how the heck was that submarine built with so many problems right out of the gate? Well, we're going to get into that right now. Submarine construction, 1920 to 1972. K-19 was built in the 50s at the heart of the Cold War to be able to send a nuclear ballistic submarine to sit off the coast of the east coast of America, while the Americans have their nuclear submarines off the coast of Russia. Well, if you watch the movie, you know anything about it, it didn't quite work too well. So, who was involved with all this? It starts out in the time of the Tsars, at the last little bit of the Royal Empire of Orthodox Russia. Extensive Tsar submarine work was adapted by the Soviets at the end of the 1920s, and a few Tsars model submarines are still operating in 1940. Soviet domestic construction began in 1928 with the L and M classes. The L class was based on the British L-55, which sank off of Kronstadt, was raised by the Soviets. 23 of the L class and 1 L special were built to this model by 1938. The M class, a small 200-ton coastal submarine of limited performance, was made possible only by the introduction of electric welding under the terms of the General Electric Technical Assistance Contract. Mm-hmm.
And General Electric again.
Yep. So all subsequent Soviet submarine development has been heavily influenced by German U-boat designs, and more recently by U.S. designs. In 1926, a German naval mission under Admiral Splendor visited the USSR and provided the plans of the most successful German submarines. Details of operational experience and the services of the German submarine experts. The Russians obtained sets of U-boat plans, the most important of which were those of the B-3 type, one of the most successful designs for the conventional submarine ever produced, as the Type 7 B-3 was the backbone of the German U-boat fleet in World War II. A variant of the design was built in Russia, first known as the N-class, nicknamed Nemcat, or German Girl, and later as the S-class. The Chonka class was based on German B-3 plans. The S-class enlarged Chuka is the German Type 7 U-boat.
So that's pretty close collaboration if you're giving the plans of your best submarine to Russia.
Yep. Wow. Italian influence came in 2 submarine classes. 8 vessels in the Garibaldi class were of the Adriatico design, and the 17 Bravata class submarines were development from the Garibaldi. 2 submarines were bought from Vickers Armstrong in the United Kingdom in 1936, and the Soviet V class comprised Vickers Armstrong submarines built in the United Kingdom in 1944 and transferred to the USSR under Lend-Lease. Hopefully this doesn't hurt brother any worse. Talking about Italy here, folks. They're kind of crazy over there.
Well, Mussolini was a socialist, so that but it's kind of ironic that Germany and Italy are both selling military hardware to Russia, and at the same time fighting Russian troops in Spain in the Spanish Civil War.
Yep.
It shows you that their politics were not as simple as one is led to believe by your history textbook in high school.
Mm-hmm. The United States sold submarine equipment to the Soviet Union in the first 5 or 6 years of the 1930s. A proposal was received by the Electric Boat Company of Groton, Connecticut in January 1930 for the construction of submarines and submarine ordnance equipment for the shipment to the USSR. In a letter to the Secretary of State, Electric Boat argued that there was no objection to the construction of submarines for such friendly foreign powers, and further said that this was in the interest of the Navy as it kept domestic shipbuilders at work. The State Department, though admitting there was no legal restriction on shipments of munitions to the Soviet Union, said it viewed it with disfavor to the construction of periscopes, submarines, and ordnance equipment for the shipment to the Russians.
A little token disagreement there.
There was also a flow of American technology under the Sperry Gyroscope Technical Assistance contract for marine instruments, and many Soviet engineers were trained by the company in the United States, although attempts in 1937 and 38 to buy fire control equipment were thwarted by the Navy Department officers. By 1937, Electric Boats was negotiating with the Soviets for construction of submarines, this time with the blessing of the State Department.
Under Roosevelt, yeah, who was a Bolshevik. Well, he was a Bolshevik and a Nazi supporter.
Yeah. The massive post-war expansion of the Soviet submarine fleet has depended upon the designs and technical construction resources of Germany and the United States. After World War II, the Soviets carefully studied German submarines and operational techniques using equipment and materials received under the Lend-Lease, and transferring complete shipyards and great quantities of submarine building equipment from Germany. A large submarine construction program was undertaken, a program still in progress.
That's when he wrote his book. This book was written in the 70s, right? What am I reading from?
Yeah. 77.
77.
In 1972, the Soviet W-class attack submarine accounted for about half of the Soviet submarine fleet. The W-class is a direct copy of the successful German type 11 U-boat. The vessel has 1,621 ton displacement and is capable of traveling 11,000 miles without refueling. All the Germans built 120 type 11 boats by early 1945. Few went to sea. Almost all these completed submarines fell into the Soviet hands. Thus, a substantial portion, perhaps 1/4 of the Soviet submarine force was built in Germany to German construction standards. A modification of type 11 became the Soviet Z-class, slightly larger with greater range. The most modern Soviet diesel-powered submarine, the F-class, was also developed from these advanced German designs. Early Soviet nuclear-powered submarines are similar to the USS Nautilus in configuration. The Soviet Y-Yank class is copied from the USS Polaris ballistic missile submarine, with plans obtained through the massive Soviet espionage program in Great Britain. Submersibles for deep sea work have been purchased in the West, most recent sale being the Hyco Piscis 4, sold in 1972. Missile-carrying submarines are fitted with Golem-class missiles. Golem 1 and Golem 2 are direct descendants of German V2, while Golem 3 is a two-stage solid fuel equivalent of the Lockheed Polaris.
I get the impression that the Russians are not a creative people and they're just copying everything they get from the West.
Mhm.
Maybe it was just cheaper that way. But boy, in the Cold War, we were led to believe that Russia was the industrial powerhouse, full of geniuses, and they designed everything on their own, and they didn't copy anything, and it was all Russian made, and blah, 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 blah.
Yep. So the K-19 would be the exact copy with a few mistakes in it for the nuclear reactor to go haywire and all other things to go haywire. It would be the USS Polaris ballistic missile submarine.
Mm-hmm. Well, when you copy something, you can make some small measuring mistakes, and that's a big problem if you don't know the actual measurement of the item. So this is how Russia built up her navy. What does Sutton tell us about the Cold War naval rivalry, how it developed around the Cuban Missile Crisis?
So, let's get to that a little bit. Okay. So, to move those missiles, you needed the merchant marine vessels. The Soviet merchant marine is an essential segment of the Soviet armed forces. And Soviet strategic plans has the prime function of carrying weapons and military supplies for Soviet ventures overseas. Korea, Vietnam, Cuba being the most prominent of these. There are two extraordinary facts about the gigantic and strategic Soviet merchant marine. First, over 2/3, 68% to be exact, of its ship tonnage has been built outside the Soviet Union. The remaining 32% was built into the Soviet yards, and to a great extent with shipbuilding equipment from the West, particularly Finland and the NATO allies Great Britain and Germany. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
What to say? If it weren't for those countries, there would be no Cuba or Korea or Vietnam or
Mm-hmm.
So the other 4/5, 79.3% to be exact, of the main marine diesel engines used to propel these vessels of the Soviet merchant marine were built in the West. In other words, only 1/5 of the main diesel engines were built in USSR. Moreover, even this startling statistic does not reflect the full nature of Soviet dependence on foreign marine diesel technology, as all of the main engines manufactured in USSR are built to foreign designs. The full scope of the dependence of the Soviet marine diesel technology on foreign citizens is shown in Table 9.1 of this chapter found in this book, folks. So you can download the book on the show page to see the table. Now, the manufacturers of the marine diesels in the Soviet Union has received considerable foreign and technical assistance. Technical assistance agreements were made with both MAN and Sulzer in the 1920s. And the Soviet Union has continued since the time to receive MAN Maschinenfabrik of Augsburg, Nuremberg, and Sulzer Technology. In addition to it negotiated new assistance agreements with Burmester and Wayne of Denmark, and Skoda of Czechoslovakia in the 50s and 60s.
It's interesting that Nuremberg and Czechoslovakia are designing marine engines, so not near the ocean. But I guess they're desperate to sell to anyone.
An important agreement was signed in early 1959 in Copenhagen by Niels Mueck, managing director of Burmester and Wayne, and Mikoyan, who visited the company on his way back to Moscow from a visit to the United States. The Danish company also has a licensing agreement with a Polish engine manufacturer, Stocznia Gdansk, and most of that organization's annual production of 350,000 bhp of B&W designs goes to the Soviet Union.
Well, Poland during the Cold War was a satellite of the Soviet Union, so.
So we know about the ships now. Now let's learn about the State Department.
The U.S. State Department.
So if anyone has flashbacks or post-traumatic stress disorder from Cuba, I'm sorry, but it's time for the hard-hitting truth. The Poltava class of the Soviet merchant vessels, which is equipped with a special hatches for the purpose, was used to carry missiles to Cuba in 1962. The main engines for the first two vessels in the class were manufactured by Burmester and Wayne in Copenhagen. Engines for the remaining 18 ships in the class came from the Bryansk plant in the Soviet Union. Both the Danish and Bryansk engines were built to the same specifications, 740mm cylinder diameter to 1,600mm piston stroke. The Danish engines have 6 cylinders, while the Soviet engines have 7 cylinders. In all other respects, they are identical Burmester plane design engines. In 1959, the Danish company made a technical assistance agreement with the Soviets for manufacture of large marine diesels. Not manufactured in the USSR at the time, and U.S. State Department through COCOM approved the export of the technology as non-strategic. As any member of the COCOM has veto power, objection by the State Department representatives would have effectively blocked the agreement.
So they no strategic consequence. Yeah, give them a merchant fleet so they can move missiles around the world. That's no strategic consequence.
The Poltava class ships were used to carry Soviet missiles to Cuba in 1962. The first Poltava engines were manufactured in Denmark in 1959. Cutting it a little closer. Not much time to test those suckers. Only 3 years of testing?
You can see why they ordered them. They already had a plan to move missiles to Cuba.
The ships entered service in 1962. Okay. Only a few months before they were used for transporting missiles to Cuba. In other words, the first operational use of these diesel engines approved by state as non-strategic was in the challenge to the United States, which brought us to the brink of nuclear war. The Poltava-class ships have extra-long hatches, 8 of the 13.6-meter length and the 6.2 meters width, ideal for loading medium-range missiles.
And hiding them.
Yeah. After the near-nuclear conflict between the United States and the Soviet Union, the Soviets removed their missiles as deck cargo on other merchant ships. Wow. They weren't hiding. They hid them as deck cargo.
Yeah, this is just a long tube, you know, it's just a long pipe. It happens to look like a missile, but it's just a long pipe. Back then, there was no spy satellites. So the odds of seeing what was on the deck of a ship were highly unlikely because you'd have to have a spy plane fly over the spot just at the right moment and take a picture of a moving object. Not so easy back then.
The little British Labinsk was one of the ships used. Labinsk is a 9,820-ton freighter built in 1960 in Poland on Soviet account. It has Italian engines made by Fiat in Italy. They're supposed to be a Catholic company.
No, Fiat's a Masonic company.
Oh, that explains it. I think 8,000 bhp, 8 cylinders, 750 millimeter cylinder diameter, 1,320 millimeter piston stroke. This is the same Fiat company that later in the 60s provided technical assistance for the largest automobile plant in the USSR.
It's also Fiat is the company that Obama gave Chrysler to, or was it General Motors when he dissolved the company? Chrysler. He gave Fiat the company for no reason. It's like, why would he give it to Fiat? He just gave it to them. He didn't even have to sell it to them. He gave it to them. And this was a reward for their loyal service to the Masonic Order.
Yep. In 1962, the U.S. Navy photographed Russian merchant ships unloading missile supplies at the Cuban port of Mariel, then and now a Russian naval base in Cuba. These ships included the Vingorsk, an 8,000-ton freighter built in Poland on Soviet account with Dutch engines, 7,800 bhp Sulzer diesels made by the NV Workspoor of Amsterdam. Holland is a NATO ally, and again, the export of such engines to the USSR is illegal and could have been halted by the State Department. When we look closely at the transportation technology used to bring about the most dangerous international crisis in the last decade, we find that the U.S. State Department not only had the knowledge and capability to stop the transfer, but was required by law to ensure that the technology was not passed to the Soviets. In other words, there would have been no Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962 if the State Department had followed congressional instructions and carried out the job it is paid to do.
Is a classic example of one administration causing the problems for the next one. But Eisenhower's administration was very pro-communist. That's what you didn't like about Patton. And there was a lot of things he did to actually build up the Soviet Union and enslave the people of Eastern Europe. And so it's not surprising.
Yep.
Because let's not forget, Cuba used to be a Catholic country. Its Catholicism was completely destroyed by the Marxist takeover.
So, again, the same Soviet merchant ships on the Haiphong supply road. In 1967, while the Johnson administration was campaigning for yet more peaceful trade with the Soviet Union, the Soviet ship previously supplied by our allies as peaceful trade were carrying weapons to Haiphong to kill Americans. You can see this table 9.2, in this chapter in the book. It'll tell you the name of the ship, the construction year, ship, engines, holes, everything, and where this thing was built. So let's give you one. M26-121, year of construction, 1960. Weight of ship, 4,084 tons. The Cura. It was made. The engines were made in Germany. The hull in Germany. So next one is M25-151, 1962. 9,344 tons. The Simmerpol. Engines Poland. Place of construction, Switzerland.
Switzerland?
Yep.
On the Rhine?
Uh-huh.
It's a pretty big ship to build on the Rhine.
Mm-hmm. M11-647, 1936, 2,900 tons. Arlica, United Kingdom on the engines, and United Kingdom on the construction place. So, yeah. On it goes, folks. You can read the entire table in this book on page 106. In addition to the ships listed in table 9.2, the Kubernetes Ship, a 6,000-ton freighter built in the United States, was unloading at Haiphong in August 1966. When American planes attacked, so was the Sovereign, built in Poland with Swiss engines, and Uselog, a 4,400-ton freighter with West German MAN engines. Los Angeles Times, May 7, 1967. San Francisco Chronicle, August 6, 1966. Even the American news back then knew about it, folks, and we did nothing.
Well, those years are the Johnson administration. He took over after Kennedy's assassination. He was completely a Freemason. Kennedy was the only one who wasn't a Mason. Well, I guess why he was assassinated.
No, isn't West Germany the non-Soviet portion of Germany?
Yeah, West Germany is the Allied part of Germany. It's supposed to be friendly to all of us, at least during the Cold War.
A Soviet ship involved in an altercation with U.S. destroyers in 1966 was the Inger, a 4,000-ton freighter built in West Germany in 1961 with a manned specification engine. So, what was an Allied ship built for the Soviets doing attacking a U.S. destroyer?
The fact that these ships are being built and almost immediately being used for military purposes by Russia shows that Russia wasn't buying them for their economy and that Russia already had long-term military plans. But it also argues strongly that the companies building them knew they were arming the Soviet Union, because when you're building a ship for military purposes, there's all kinds of specifications that have to be met that wouldn't be met for a mere civilian craft. Okay. And you have to tell the shipbuilder that, and he would know that. He would know immediately you're asking for a military grade vehicle.
So to learn more about the Haiphong Run case, you can check out table 9.3 in this chapter, folks. As table 9.3 shows, if the State Department had done an effective job according to the laws passed by Congress, 37 of the 96 ships would not have been in Soviet hands, would not have been able to take weapons and supplies to Haiphong. Specifically, the State Department could have stopped the export of marine diesel technology to the Soviets under the Battle Act. The ships listed in Table 9.4 were used by the Soviets to supply Hanoi and have engines manufactured under the Burmester Wayne Technical Assistance Agreement of 1959. That is 8 years after the Battle Act was passed by Congress.
So the State Department is responsible for most of the dead there on the American side in the Vietnam War.
Mm-hmm.
And politicians, or I'd say the Johnson administration, killed the American soldiers in the Vietnam War.
Yeah. And Sutton goes in to ask this question. Could the Soviets have used other ships? He says to you, the reader who's going to read this later, turn to page 155. Over 2/3 of the Soviet merchant ships and more than 4/5 of the marine diesels in the Soviet merchant ships were not built in USSR. The Soviets would certainly not have attempted foreign adventures with a merchant marine substantially smaller than the one they have now in operation. In other words, we have always had the absolute means to stop the Soviet tide of aggression, if that was our objective. The provision of fast, large ships to the Soviet supply of North Vietnamese indicates where to export control has failed. Segments of the Soviet merchant marine were examined to determine the relationship between the western origins and the maximum speed of Soviet ships. It was anticipated that because of NATO limitations on the speed of merchant shine supplied to the USSR reflected in the export control laws, that the average speed of NATO-supplied ships would be considerably less than the ships supplied either by the Eastern European countries to the USSR or built within the USSR itself. The results of the analysis of the 42 Soviet ships on the Haiphong supply run are as follows. Merchant ships with engines manufactured in the free world, average speed 14.62 knots. Merchant ships with engines manufactured in Eastern Europe, average speed 13.25 knots. Merchant ships with engines manufactured in the Soviet Union, average speed 12.23 knots. All 42 ships were built after 1951, the year the Battle Act was implemented.
So the Soviet Union was allowed to spread communism around the world. And why did the Freemasons do that? You get more sales of military hardware because you have perpetual conflict, and you can openly destroy Christian societies around the world and claim the communists did it.
Yeah. So the most obvious point to be made is that the average speed of Western supplied ships used by the Soviets on the Haiphong run was 2.4 knots, i.e. about 20% above that of the Soviet domestic-built ships on the run. This includes only those ships built after 1951, i.e. after the implementation of the Battle Act, and its limitation of speed and tonnage on ships supplied to the USSR. The legal administration of the Battle Act also applies to weight limitations. The faster the larger Soviet ships are from the west, and the slower smaller ships are from the domestic Soviet shipyards.
So here's another classic example: the Congress passing a law, but the executive, which is controlled by the Masons, because they're controlled by the Democrat Republican Party, completely ignoring the elected representatives of the United States. So this, we're waiting the results of the U.S. election in 2020 as we make this program, because it's November 5th, and this will give you some sobriety, realizing that you've been hoodwinked. You've been hoodwinked for more than a century. The election will mean nothing. The Masons, as long as the Masons are in control, as long as the party you voted for is not a Christian party, it won't mean anything other than whatever Congress might have any good desire to do will always be thwarted.
Mm-hmm. Under the COCOM machinery, in which each nation participating in the embargo of the strategic materials submits its own views on the shipment of specific items. There's also Anonymity Rule. In other words, no item may be shipped to the USSR unless all participating nations agree. Objections by any nation would halt shipment. Douglas Dillon, former Under-Secretary of State, has pointed out, I can recall no instance in which a country shipped a strategic item to the Soviet bloc against the disapproving vote of a participating member of the COCOM. It must therefore be presumed that the United States delegates approved the export of ships of high average speed, as well as marine diesel engines, in the Burmester Technical Assistance Agreement of 1959 for the Soviet manufacturers of marine diesels, all of which were later used against the United States by the Soviets in supplying North Vietnam. It is clear from this evidence alone that successive administrations have been long on words but short on action to stop the Soviets from carrying out their world ambitions. Further successive administrations have committed American soldiers to foreign wars without the resolve to win, and obviously in the knowledge that American technical assistance was being provided to both sides in these wars.
We already covered in the previous program how Ford was building the trucks. The Ford plants in Russia were building the trucks that brought the equipment down the Ho Chi Minh Trail. We have the American-made ships or the European-made ships bringing the supplies to North Korea. It was an entire Western European operation.
Yeah.
American operation against their own forces.
Mm-hmm.
It was Vietnam is a completely fake war in the sense of the Freemasons orchestrated both sides of the conflict. And it was designed to break down society and spread drug addiction among the youth and kill some of the best of the young people of the United States. Because if you can orchestrate a war and get people to say, this is an honest, just war, who's going to go to war? The honest and just men. And they're the ones who are going to get killed. And what are you going to be left with? Coward and knaves. That's going to be left with cowards and knaves. And that's exactly what the Freemasons want.
Yeah. So he finally finishes up before his conclusions. Under COCOM arrangements in the Battle Act, the State Department can enter an objection to COCOM concerning the technological exports to the Soviet Union. No COCOM member can make such exports over the objection of any other member of COCOM. In other words, if the State Department had wanted to implement the intent of Congress, it had the ability to stop transfer of the Marine engines and the Marine engine technology to the USSR. It did not do so. The result was that 37 out of 96 Soviet ships on the Haiphong run had Western-built engines manufactured after 1951, which could have been restricted by the State Department.
And this is just a perfect case in point how the modern little liberal democracy is designed to serve the lodge, because the lodge gets rid of Christian monarchy.
Mm-hmm.
In place of Christian monarchy, it gives us democracies in where you have an executive branch and a legislature. The legislature says this is going to be the law, but the executive branch must execute it. All the Masons now have to do is control the president of the country, and then they control the whole country because he doesn't have to execute the laws.
Yep.
And so we've replaced Christian monarchy with Masonic monarchy. Here's a classic example of it, and they'll kill their own people do it. Whereas the Christian monarch would never kill his own people.
Yeah. In brief, the State Department had the means to stop the transfer of marine diesel technology. The department was required to do so under law. It did not do so. These ships carried the weapons and supplies to North Vietnam to kill Americans and their allies. The blame is the tragic case is squarely at the door of the State Department.
Well, it's clearly at the door of the presidents who put the people in the State Department. Yep. Eisenhower and Johnson and Nixon, all Freemasons.
Yeah. That's it.
It's a really sad story, but it's enlightening. I think this is one of the first books that Sutton wrote, where he started figuring out there's something really wrong in American politics, and you need to trace the facts. He's a very factual study if you're looking at the designs of ships. And any country that takes a design of a military vessel and gives it to their neighbor is a country that is really close ally. It means you're totally in the same boat together, because that would be the most stupid thing to do, even with a friendly power, because you never know if they would turn against you in a war.
Mm-hmm. So tomorrow, I wanted to finish up the book by Anthony C. Sutton, The Wall Street and the Rise of Hitler.
And what more does he reveal that we haven't covered?
We will reveal the everything and more that we don't know yet about the Wall Street Nazi collaboration in World War II, and the arrest warrant issued by the U.S. Army at the trials in Nuremberg for all American companies, their bosses, the presidents, everybody, which never
Oh,
happened.
the one that was thwarted, the one
Mhm.
they issued for show. And this shows that they knew there were criminals, but the Masons have designed an entire political system where they never get caught for their crimes. Their crimes are their moral crimes are never civil crimes.
Yep.
But don't you try to do anything honest as a Christian and oppose them. That's a crime even without a definition.
Yep.
And you'll be disappeared, I suppose. So this is just really hard evidence. I mean, I thought anyone watching these shows we're doing on Sutton and thinks you should still vote Democrat or Republican is obviously a Freemason, or they've converted and that's their real religion. They might call themselves Catholic, they might call themselves Christian, but they're not. They're a Freemason, because if you knowingly support parties that have done this, then you're consenting to all these sins and all these crimes. You're a wicked person. You not. I don't mean a wicked person with lowercase. I mean with a capital W, wicked. And it is just pitiful to see the hypocrisy of all these Catholic talking heads. They've been watching our programs for now.
Well done, censor. I was wondering when you're going to step in. Now that Brother Alexis back. Now, while we wait for him to come back, you can go to tomorrow's show page and click the photo in the show page and read the actual arrest warrant. Okay, there he is.
What was the last thing you heard me say before I was censored?
The Catholic talking heads.
Oh yeah, we're going to see the Catholic talking heads, I think, show how complete fakes they are, because it's like, if you don't vote Trump, it's the end of the world. And if Trump loses the election, then they're going to say, it's not the end of the world. Stay where you are, keep voting Republican, persevere another 4 years, and we'll take the country back.
Mhm.
Complete hypocrisy, because they're just control puppets. That's all they are. And the censor couldn't stand me saying that.
As I told those who want to watch it while you were coming back, I was like, you can read the actual arrest warrant in tomorrow's show page because I took a screenshot of it.
Okay. And this is why you need to form a Christian party, and we propose the Catholic Party of America, because you have to have people who will say what they do and do what they say, and uphold right and wrong, uphold right and punish wrong, and not play these games and break the power of the lodge forever.
Mm-hmm.
And America will never be great without that. America will just go down in history and be destroyed without that. So it's up to us to be true Christians or not. If we're not truly faithful to Christ, then our nation will be destroyed, and we will deserve that, because nations who abandon God will be turned unto hell. That's the teaching of the Psalms. Every nation which is forgetful of God will be converted unto hell.
Yeah.
That's a line right out of the Psalms.
So if you want to learn more about the Catholic Party, go to CatholicPartyForAmerica.wordpress.com and please check it out. We're adding more stuff every day. I've been working on making a short little information poster about the show we did on John Adams to help turn that into a poster. So be short and to the point what we were talking about in that show. Yeah, and looks like the Hispanic Catholics of America be a good one to recruit. So
Yeah, the Hispanic Catholics of America really need to step up. You have to break out of the mind control of the Democrat Republican parties. You come from nations that don't have the Democratic Republican Party, so you know how bad the Freemasons are. Both these parties are Freemasonic. Don't vote for them. Don't vote for the Marxists. Join the Catholic Party of America. We need a party that is Christian and not racist, okay? Christian and not controlled by the Freemasons, and Christian that's in favor of Christians, and has a deep, long appreciation for real civilization, not the phony civilization created by the Masonic lodges. So this is the future of America. Padre Pio told us that America will be a Catholic country one day, and so we need a Catholic party to prepare for that. It's a long haul, but it needs people going to be honest and stop lying 24/7 like all these talking heads do, who are English-speaking Catholics who are just complete fakes. I'd have to say the church in the United States that speak English is almost completely and morally collapsed. There's like nothing left intellectually or anything. There's like almost no institution or media outlet that's going to tell you the truth. We're one of the only. There's some bloggers that follow us, but actual channels and stuff. I have to praise Keeping the Faith Media from Kansas City. They're getting better on a daily basis, and hope we recruit them to our side, because the others are just telling lies, 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 and more lies, more damn lies, 24/7. It's all, you know, drink up the Kool-Aid and spew it out. They're not Catholic in how they think about politics, not in the least.
Yep. So please like and share these programs. We had a comment yesterday on YouTube from some guy. I'm not sure if he was a troll, but he's like, "You guys are either insane or this is very insidious." I was like, "Oh yeah, very insidious."
Insidious to the Masonic order, yes, but and same. The guy must have been a complete Freemason. The Freemasons are freaking out about our program because we're exposing them for what they are and how evil they are, and we're calling them the name what they are. Don't talk about toleration. Just say these people are evil and wicked and need to be locked up. That's exactly what. And don't compromise on that. Even if it's your opponent in a political race, if he's not a Christian, he's a Mason, say you're evil, wicked, and you need to be locked up, not elected.
Yep. So, yeah. Masonic Lodge is insidious. You know, everything they've done throughout, I don't know, since Woodrow Wilson, maybe before. Yeah, insidious, evil. They're like the original actual Dr. Evil from James Bond.
Exactly right. Or if you've ever read sci-fi, if you've ever read Isaac Asimov's Foundation trilogy, the Foundation is the Masonic Lodge. It's an evil institution that's been around a long time, and it's all out to bring down Christianity, the Empire of Christ. And you cannot tolerate these people. They're fraudsters, they're liars, they're backstabbers, they're manipulators, they're murderers, they're mass murderers, they're thieves, and they're frauds, and they're Satanists.
Yep.
They're abusers. It's unbelievably just a cesspool of iniquity that the Masonic Lodge and its agents are. And a Christian party has to be willing to say that without fear.
Yeah. So, and we're one of them. We have plans on taking them down, you know, and actually following out those orders of the U.S. Army that were never issued, or following the orders of Congress that were stopped by the executive branch and Franklin D. Roosevelt's administration. So, yeah. We're not afraid. So tune in tomorrow for more Sutton. I don't know what's going to happen after the show, but hopefully we'll still be around.
We'll touch that third rail and watch the sparks fly.
Yep. So if you like what we're doing, you can still send us a donation through the mail to Order Militaris Inc. Go to ordl-militaris.us. Go to the contact page there. You'll see the mailing address. You address your check, Order Militaris Inc. In the memo section, you put Order Militaris Radio TV, and you mail that check into the address on the contact page. And the mailing address and everything on how to send in donations is on our show pages now. So thank you for those who are being super generous, working on finding stuff to get back on live radio, even if it's on our own setup somehow.
Yeah, I'll point out that we use the word donation in the Catholic sense of a gift, but this is not tax deductible, okay? So don't deduct on your taxes, and we can't give you a receipt for that.
Yeah.
But it doesn't go to AJ, it doesn't go to me, it goes for equipment for Order Militaris Radio.
Yep.
TV.
So this is Order Militaris Radio TV signing off. Deus Volt.
Deus Volt.